That's
And we're live.
song. Thank y'all. We are very enlivened thanks
That's
to
right.
that music.
It is Monday. It's not even 9 o'clock because we're all getting older, and we decided to stop doing this at 12 at 11 o'clock Eastern time. I am Andrew D. Meredith, fantasy author extraordinary, 7 books, and this is my wife, Patricia
Meredith, and I'm an author of mystery books, also 7 books.
That's true. That's right. And we are here with Enclave Burnett, lorehaven.com publisher and nonfiction author, and soon to be fiction author.
Yes.
Welcome, Stephen.
Yes.
Glad to be here. That's 2 books so far. Obviously 5 to go to reach the total that both of y'all have set in so short a time.
Hey, you know what? We all start the race at different times, but in the end, we all get the same payment at the end, right?
Yes. Or perhaps the satisfaction and pride of a job well done for the glory of Jesus Christ and the good of readers. Hopefully.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, we're here to talk about you, about your books. But before we do anything else, we want to ask you some very random questions that we've prepared.
So we always start with some more random ones than just book ones.
And note for the viewing audience who have not seen these questions in advance.
No.
We're not doing a bit. They are springing some tough questions on me, possibly political questions, possibly what's your favorite Christmas candy? I don't know.
Yes.
Possibly.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. So this is what we're going to start with is who is your favorite superhero in comics and in any cinematic universe?
Superman.
In both?
Hands down. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, a close second and third are Spider-Man and Batman, and I don't know in which order I would place them.
Okay.
But some who've seen my activism in the fan communities are aware of my love for Restore the Snyderverse, and I am going to keep the faith longer than any sane adult, along with my faith in Santa Claus. And who knows, this has been a freak year last year. It may just actually happen, but Henry Cavill is my Superman.
Awesome.
Yes.
Is there a particular era of in comics Superman that you prefer?
You know, I'm not as familiar with the Superman comics. Gasp, gasp, gasp. But I have seen some Spider-Man comics and Batman comics in my time.
Nice.
So the it's more of a stray kind of a drive-by enjoyment of a Superman comic here or there. But I'm not a huge comics reader as much as some of professionals out there may be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next question is what are you reading right now? I know there's a TBR, so you got to pick like what's sitting on the top of the TBR right now.
Okay, so actively reading right now a few books at once. I just finished the Andy Serkis narrated audiobook for The Fellowship of the Ring, which is absolutely top tier. That's just great holiday reading.
Yes.
I'm reading out loud That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis with my wife. Book 3 of the Ransom trilogy.
Yeah.
And the main reason why I'm rereading that is because it's all coming to life here or there.
Yes.
I believe there's even an NICE in the UK right now. I don't know if they have a pragmatometer or a shrunken head or whatever, but they're over there up to some mischief. Oh, what else? I just finished a nonfiction book about relationships and stuff. Oh, what else? I need to pick another audiobook. So if anybody else wants to give me some recommendations,
all right,
that'd be fantastic. Along with some beta reads of stuff by friends. Josiah DeGraff, my friend, he's coming out with a book called Study Shattered Spells. I'm reading that secret read.
Nice.
And then my friend Marion Jacobs has been hard at work on another nonfiction book about fiction called On Magic and Miracles, which is fantastic, and it is the book that I wish that I had written, but I'm glad that I didn't and that she did, so that I can write Above the Circle of Earth. And
that's right.
Yeah, she can have the fantasy, I can have the sci-fi, at least for now.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. And you haven't read the Ransom trilogy yet.
I've read the first two. I've read 1.5.
You've read 1,
and I've read Screwtape Letters.
That's not part of the trilogy.
Yes, it's not part of the trilogy, but
it could be in the same continuity. I mean, the devil is active in both of those universes.
And the intro to Screwtape Letters is written by Ransom.
Is it now?
Like the book of Screwtape was discovered by Ransom.
The headcanon accepted. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Like Ransom is the scribe who put it down after he discovered the letters from Screwtape.
Yeah, he says, I have no intention of revealing how this correspondence fell into my hands. I agree. I agree. That is the headcanon. It is accepted. Ransomverse, yes. And blessings upon you both for calling it the Ransomverse. I will start a denomination based on calling it that, along with reading the Narniad in publication order. No,
we will join so long as part of the canon. Part of the scripture is that we must use the Oxford comma.
Right.
As long as that's part of the canon, we're good.
Oxford, that's correct. And start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, not The Magician's Nephew, which, by the way, is likely for Netflix. I'm guessing they'll start with The Magician's Nephew, but if it's good, I won't be a hater.
Yes. Well, it'd be nice to finally see that one. Like, they always start.
They better get it right, but it is the most modern of the stories, isn't it? There's actually a multiverse. There's some contemporary sensibility. There's a little more easy equality between Diggory and Polly. It would play very well.
It'll give a chance for her to jump pawns and show Timothy Chalamet of like pop and look in there, and then he's there, and then they're gone. And
absolutely, and then you jump into the MCU, and then you jump into, and then there's the Flash looking ugly from that DC movie, and we were done talking about that. Okay. No more multiverse. Let's focus on the one God gave us.
All right. Speaking of anywhere in the known universe, where would you go? And who, fictional or not, would be your travel buddy?
Fascinating. I would want to go to Mars, but give it 100 some odd years right now. You know, I hear it's frightfully cold up there this time of year, and there is radiation and only a few abandoned robots and a few robots that are kind of working. So I would like to go. I would take Elon Musk with me, or rather he'd take me with him, and he would probably drive me crazy, and I would try to give him the gospel at least once, and he'd probably get distracted by the human flourishing parts and miss the Jesus parts, and we'd have a grand old time.
That's true. Yeah. And he'd work you to the bone too.
I would never get any sleep at all.
No. But at least when you weren't working, you'd be playing video games.
Apparently, but probably getting cleaned like crazy by his mad spectrum skills. Yeah. God bless Elon Musk, but he needs Jesus.
Yes.
He's
all right.
Us.
So those,
before we get going with our questions, I do see some people. So what we tend to do on this show is if you have a question, can you please put an asterisk before it? So that's a little star shape. Sorry, I just lost my breath. Put a little star shape before it, and then we're going to set it aside. And so we find a good time to pop that question in there. But keep including your comments, and we'll be sharing some of those later on.
I will say we have Renee Meredith in the channel who introduced me to Lorehaven and Fantastical Truth podcast.
Hey, thanks, Renee.
Back like first year. I mean, that was 2020, right?
Yeah.
Lorehaven got started in 2018, and then we kicked off the podcast just a couple of years later, thanks to lockdowns. And lockdowns have been a blessing in disguise.
And that's when I started listening.
I think that's about the time I started listening. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it was before lockdown because we were still at the Shado place. So, and then after that, I was had nothing else to do, so I listened to every single one of them.
Exactly.
All right, a fan. Appreciate that, Andrew.
Right?
You start writing.
Then you're inspired by other writers and other. Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so you are the founder of Lorehaven and Fantastical Truths. Before that, the Speculative Faith blog, and then everything grew out of that. Can you tell us more about
those who have never heard of those?
Absolutely. So you name-checked Speculative Faith. I got to say, I was late to Speculative Faith. That was started by some folks who beat me to the concept by a few months. They started it in 2006, and thanks for asking about that after I just reviewed the history, because we just migrated all the Spec Faith content officially over to Lorehaven, so you can find it there. It started off as a team blog really designed to raise awareness of more people asking for Christian-made fantasy from traditional publishers. And to some extent, that task failed spectacularly, because although we see now some larger evangelical or Christian publishers being more interested in fantasy, especially for the young adult reading audience, there's been a lot more independent authors just go off and publish their own, or there's been smaller publishers that arise, like my publisher Enclave. There's a bunch of new ones out there, and there's some ones that have some staying power. So Speculative Faith and its team blog approach really got this started from about 2006. And then I wanted to do more like structured type articles and get things a little more organized. Like, the strength of Speculative Faith is that it was very nimble, and everybody was writing about what they wanted to write about. One of the results of that, though, was that a writer likes to write about writing. If we're not careful, we just get up in our little writers clubhouse and we pull the rope ladder up after us. And then there's all the readers down there going, what are they talking about up there? So a big focus of Lorehaven was, this is going to be a fan resource. It's going to be for fans, for readers specifically. We're going to have like part of the founding documents, like, don't talk about writing. Everybody else can talk about writing. Realm makers can talk about writing.
Yes.
There's a whole slew of writer podcasts out there. So when we started the Fantastical Truth podcast from Lorehaven, that was one of the ground rules too. This is not a writer's podcast. We don't want to take away from the guys who are already doing that.
Right.
We'll go behind the scenes occasionally, but what we really want to do is approach it as fans. And Lord willing, I'm sticking close to that goal, even while I'm talking about my own book. I don't mind going to a writer's conference and talking about those things when I'm experienced enough and wise enough to do so. But I really always want to be, Lord willing, a fan first, to love these stories, not because, oh, well, this author is doing something great, so maybe I can do something great too, and it's about me and my writer goals. Like, I want to enjoy the stories for God's glory.
Yeah.
Yes,
Good words.
Yeah.
So something I've appreciated about your work is that you establish the differentiation between Christian fiction and Christian written fiction. Would you like to elaborate on that?
We're talking about being writers.
Favorite topic, yes.
Yeah.
And I always separate that from like the industry talk, where a professional writer, traditional publisher, or an independent author will immediately skip to, do I put the Christian label on the back cover or the spine?
Right.
I am presently agnostic about that. I haven't seen the hardcover for my book, which is definitely Christian made fiction, because I'm a Christian and I made the fiction. Let me see if the ARC has it on the spine here. It says science fiction, but you read the description and like, we're talking about missionaries in space, and the word gospel is used once, like right in the middle of it. And it's pretty clear, but there's a school of folks who say, well, you put the Christian label on there and that is a kiss of death. Because Christian fiction is bonnets and historicals and romance and that sort of thing. And sometimes they get a little elitist about it and they go, ew, that's not true. Jesus is in every genre except a few really sinful ones.
Yes.
So I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm mainly thinking about belief. And I always take it back to God as the creator, as the author of reality. And his decision to make humans in his image in Genesis 1, and to give us the breath of life and imagination, and then tell us to go and make stuff using his stuff. So if we're made in his image and we're making stuff, and then later on, as Christians understand it, sin has broken us and cut off that relationship from God and made us dead in our sins, but then Jesus brings us back to life. So we're also in his image. So that makes us Christians. People who look like Jesus, who act like Jesus. That means the stuff that we make is 1 degree removed. I call it Christian made. And you can say Christian. I don't mind saying a Christian book. But to me, the book is Christian if the author, creator is a Christian, no matter whether you put the label on the book. And then other pros at the conferences and comment sections can talk about whether or not the label is beneficial for certain types of readers. I just want to talk mainly about the philosophy of it, and maybe start to redefine and challenge our obsession with the labels and the marketing, and just ask, okay, what do we mean by this from Scripture first and foremost?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So with that in mind, I think you said like you call yours a Christian made fantasy, right? So it's not
exactly, or a Christian or a Christian made sci-fi. Now, I would shorten that. I would say it's Christian sci-fi, but I wouldn't say Christian science fiction, because then it sounds like Christian Science.
Right?
It's a trap. So Tom Cruise shows up, and you get into all kinds of trouble. Christian sci-fi, I will totally own that. With obviously the disclaimer that it's not end times fiction. And it's not necessarily space opera either.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that's a perfect segue. Can you tell us a little bit more about your book? But the first one, right? You've got 2.
Well, the second one, technically, because this is the newest one that's coming out in March.
Okay.
It's to clarify, Above the Circle of Earth is not a sequel to the Pop Culture Parent.
No, but it is your second book.
Which one do y'all want to hear about first? The nonfiction Pop Culture Parent, or Above the Circle of Earth.
Let's keep going with the science fiction.
Let's do that.
Okay, let's start with that. So Above the Circle of Earth is not yet released. As of this evening, I think it's 35 days out from release. So just over a month to that street date, which I've seen is March the 4th. So the hardcovers, the digital edition, and presumably the audiobook will all launch on that date from the fine crews at Enclave Publishing. That's the basics. As for the story itself, this is the story of Brock Rivers, who never wanted to be a repairman on Mars, yet repairman on Mars he must, because when he was a kid growing up in a biblical Christian preserve in the early 22nd century, he decided that his people, God bless them, but they're very over-sheltered. Thank you very much. And aren't we supposed to be doing missions to our neighbors in the world? So he gets married eventually after a college, and his wife, Alicia, is very much on the same page with him. Well, they decide to go out and give missions a try. To make a longer story short, things go pretty badly because in the world of the early 22nd century, it is a secular government out there. There's lots to admire about them, including human space exploration into our solar system. But there's also lots of legit persecution. If you step outside your preserve, a legal district, and try to share your faith or act religious, then bad things are going to happen to you. So eventually they have to go to Mars, but then the story really picks up when they're summoned back to Earth to restart missions for Christianity that has been dormant for 50 years or so. But since you can't do it on Earth, where else do you go? Above the Circle of Earth. But they're going to encounter opposition from the humanist space regime, as well as some objections from their own people who, again, God bless them, but Christians, we have our lead, then we like to stay safe and raise our families and kind of avoid some of the difficulties out there in the world if we're not careful. So that's really the heart of the story there, is not so much a theological issue, but that calling to adventure, to a mission, and then how can you protect your family and love your people at the same time as going, therefore, to evangelize Mars.
Nice. Good pitch.
Awesome.
It's like you do this for a living or something.
You know, the elevator pitch gets a little bit easier when it's already sold. So
That's
for all
right.
you aspiring authors out there, it will eventually get easier.
Yes, it takes time. And even the one, sometimes like I figure working on mine, I was uncomfortable even, but now I look back, I'm still giving the same pitch. I'm just more comfortable with it now.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, one tip that I learned, and I don't even know if this is a professional writer's tip because I'm just wading my feet into these waters. All right. But one thing that I always loved about other people's pitches was that they named the main character. If they started off with abstracts or even world building or side characters or just sort of evaded the name of the main character, then that signaled to me, I don't know if you know who this person is yet, because you're not at the level of being able to introduce him or her to me. Right. I want to know who your hero or heroine is. Right. And then I want to know what he or she wants. And I want to know what's getting in the way and why I should care. I'm selfish.
Yeah.
And then it gives you an anchor for the person you're rooting for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So well, that kind of goes into one of the questions that we have in the chat from Dean Sue. Did the book movie The Martian impact your Above the Circle of Earth? Have you read that, seen it?
I have read The Martian, but it was long after the basically revised version of this. Yeah. I was pretty happy with it, but I was also happy that I didn't see the movie or read the book until afterwards. I will say too that because Above the Circle of Earth is a Christian-made book, there are zero F-bombs in there. People will get upset.
Thank you.
Okay, so people will get upset. This is not a perfect Christian type of story, and those don't actually exist anyway. But there's some serious threats and challenges to our heroic family and their allies in this story. But it is a wholesome story. I don't say clean necessarily, but there's not going to be anything that would be above a PG-13 rating by the Motion Picture Association. That's the type of story this is. The Martian, though, that was, when was it? I forget when the book came out, Andy Weir, but the movie came out in the mid 2010s, if I recall.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I started writing the earliest version of this thing before September 11th, and I'm not joking.
Okay.
The original September 11th. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. So lots of research going into it, or because of character building, world building?
It wasn't working on the novel that entire time. It was more
Okay.
on and off, trying other things in the meantime. But really, the reboot of this came around in 2016, so about 8 years ago.
Okay.
When there were some things going on in culture, and I'd grown up a little bit and thought, I think I can revisit this, and I think there may actually be something here. But
Isn't
I
that
still hadn't
refreshing?
seen or read The Martian. Say again?
Isn't that refreshing?
A little
Come
bit,
back
yes.
after years and go, I can actually do this now. I feel ready.
Well, it's humbling, and yet challenging, because although I've dabbled in other genres, as an incoming author, you're supposed to pick a lane and stick to it, unless you're really, really aggressively indie. And I wanted to be traditionally published if possible.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's humbling and exhilarating, but also then humbling again, because it is a Christian-made science fiction, and that's, it's not as red-headed stepchild as Christian-made horror, but it is like a distant number 2 to the reigning queen right now, which is YA fantasy.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I was gonna say, when I think of Enclave, that's what I think of, is their YA fantasy. So like my daughter and I right now are reading the Wonderland Trials by Sarah Ella.
Sarah Ella. Yeah.
Yeah. We love those.
Yeah.
And
I read Arena way back in the day, and I
remember Arena. Karen Hancock. Yeah. That was one of those that got imported to Enclave later, but I think Steve Lobby, the owner of Enclave, originally acquired her for Bethany House. Sorry, folks, don't get bored by the publisher stuff. I've been monitoring this, what I thought was a niche, for a long time, but now it's a little less niche, and I'm really happy to see the growth.
Yeah, it's great to see, especially Enclave, not feel held back by the Christian publishing industry as a whole. Like, they're doing what they want to do, and I love that.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They've been great to work with. They're doing really well. Did we answer your viewer's question, by the way, back there?
Yes, I think so. I mean,
specifically about The Martian.
Yeah. Well, and then can we pre-order it? Is your book available
Links below?
Yes, it is 100% available for pre-order. The only thing you can't pre-order yet is the audiobook, but you can pre-order the hardcover and the digital, and then they should arrive for you just in the nick of time in March, which, by the way, guess what the month of March was named after?
Mars.
Planet Mars. So Fantastical Truth will have a Martian month all month long,
and it's on March 4th.
Yeah,
which is
March
the 4th planet from the sun.
Exactly. Someone was really paying attention there. Yeah. Yes. Not only that, but the original name of Enclave Publishing was Marcher Lord Press.
Interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they Welsh?
No, I think it was a fantasy thing originally put together by the founder. So I actually remember a bit of trivia there. There was actually an official discussion on Speculative Faith, the predecessor to Lorehaven, about the name of the publisher. So I think Steve actually had a poll there, like, hey, not like you all are deciding this, but just in case, kind of polling the audience, what's a good name from the publisher? So that was probably the first time that Enclave became known as an option for the new name for Marcher Lord Press, because MLP kind of got associated with My Little Pony. It was one of a few reasons that it possibly could use a name change there.
Yeah.
Now, just to lean into that, they need a shirt that's My Little Enclave or something to sell at their booth. Yeah.
Yes, there you go. Do you have is that your book behind you?
Oh, which one? Above the Circle of Earth?
Yeah,
we're gonna hold that up there.
See it better. I love that cover. Such a great cover.
Spectacular cover. The great cover designer Kirk DuPont's. This is a prototype paperback. The paperback will not be available next month. I'll just go ahead and say next month, even though I'm referring to March. And this is what they call it, ARC, an advanced reader copy. By the way, this reader copy in my hand, when we release our Fantastical Truth episode tomorrow, you'll get more details, but I'll go ahead and spoil it here. I'm going to give this guy away along with a Lorehaven gift set to anybody who shares that podcast episode. So I'll sign it and everything, and then throw in a bunch of Lorehaven swag, including some old print issues of the magazine we used to run.
Excellent.
All right, here's my author obsession question is how many words is it? Not pages, words.
Approximately 121,000.
Oh, not very nice.
It looks nice and thick. Yeah.
It used to be thicker, and I will say, this again is aspiring author advice here. When they ask you to cut stuff, don't be a jerk about it. Just do it, and you may find that the story improves, it gets leaner, it gets meaner, and you will learn, even though you thought you learned, 14 revisions and 3 attempted novel projects ago, you will learn all over again that usually, almost always, less is more. Less is more.
Exactly. Yeah. So what other inspiration, so you've already mentioned the Ransom trilogy, but other like Christian science fiction specifically, I have a hard time thinking of examples of
how much time you got. Okay, so starting from childhood a long time ago, the first Christian made fantastical fiction that I remember enjoying was an anime in the 80s called Superbook. It was kids time travel into Bible stories.
Yes. Oh, I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah. There's a remake that's CGI that I don't know much about. My Superbook has the dub cast of Kimba the White Lion, and that means that I was exposed to anime a lot earlier than I remember. There was definitely. There was a sequel series as well, which these folks were ahead of the curve. It was like 1982, and they made a new personal computer, the means of time travel. So I was getting like time vortexes and teleportation right alongside the Bible stories. And lest anybody freak out, I knew the difference. I guess I was a weird kid, but I knew, hey, Chris, Joy, and Gizmo weren't in the Bible, but Moses was, and he's real. So I count it as a privilege to have grown up just with this early exposure to fantastical concepts by way of anime, and then Adventures in Odyssey built on that, and then obviously teenager got into Frank Peretti, as we're all supposed to do, C.S. Lewis, as we're definitely supposed to do. Lord of the Rings, eventually Left Behind series, even, which has a lot of Christian character camaraderie in the end times, and has some futuristic elements, especially in the latter books. But I wanted a space travel story, and eventually with missionaries, and I just didn't see a whole lot of those. And eventually I got into Star Trek, and I'd say probably the best comp for this story, not because there are aliens or a space station or anything, the best comp might be Deep Space Nine. I've pitched it before as like Book of Acts meets Deep Space Nine.
Oh my God, it sounds so good.
There's no wormhole. We are in our own solar system the whole time. It is very much nearer future, 100 years from this year. So there's no wormhole, there's no aliens, there's no shapeshifters, none of that. The reason I use it as a comp is because DS9 was okay with exploring and comparing, contrasting other religions besides Federation humanism. And it made the show, I like TNG the best, like everybody, it's my favorite, but DS9 is probably the best of the Star Trek shows so far anyway.
And Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5 both had that closed, it's a closed, it's all closed set, but I mean, it's on a space station, and there's missions to go away, but it's just very, very centralized.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, speaking of all these pop culture references, do you want to speak about pop culture parent, right?
Oh, yes. Technically my first book, well, 1/3 of my first book. Pop Culture Parent is a nonfiction book. And yet I'd say they're in the same creative continuity, because Pop Culture Parent is about engaging the culture of today, whereas Above the Circle of Earth is about the very human challenges of engaging the culture of the future. This book is still around. New Growth Press put that out there with my friends Ted and Jared, and but I'm blessed to have 2 books with very cool covers. There's a dragon on the cover. It counts as a fantasy book.
Yes.
Die Hard is a Christmas movie, they say, and the Pop Culture Parent is a fantasy book.
That's true.
Awesome.
And what is that about?
Helping kids engage their world for Christ. So what Ted and Jared and I noticed was that a lot of the resources we'd found from good ministries about engaging popular culture assumed that this was mainly something for the kids to do, or the parents to help the kids to do. And then there was always this kind of expectation that the kids would go somehow from having a lot of discernment done for them, and then snap, they're adults with their own kids and now they'll have to do it. Well, what happens in between? There's got to be some growing up where you test some things out, and then maybe you're not just watching everything together as a family, but your kid wants to play a video game on their own. What are the challenges of those in between stages? And Ted Turneau had already written a book about pop culture engagement, and Jared had already written some materials about applying classic education and the trivium model to this question. So we all put it together, Ted the professor, Jared the pastor, and me the storyteller, and made a really practical book about that that's been helping me out too ever since.
Excellent. Yeah.
To borrow a phrase from you, when is the sequel Terraforming the Church going to come out?
That would blend the two universes, would it not? I think I want to stick with the fiction for now. There's been no sequel announcements for this book. Don't threaten people with a franchise before they like the first one. That's what
maybe you get Ransom to write the intro.
That's what the studios, though, they're finding out. Like, do not put this is the amazing verse, in front of your movie. Before people, well, I don't even know if I like your movie. Now you're threatening me with sequels for it. So we'll see how about
I mean, like a pop culture parent sequel, like Terraforming the Church, because you and Zach constantly are talking about
terraforming
the church.
Yeah. Well, the terraforming, I mean, that could sound kind of, I like the church. I think we got enough oxygen, but terraforming Christians specifically to enjoy fantastical stories as our default. There's other religious traditions that have already done that. And I would prefer that if we are, as Christians, concerned with eternity, we're looking forward to this amazing, fantastical planet that Jesus is going to make for us out of this old earth, then I think our stories need to help train us to expect those fantastical realities, which frankly, I think that's probably the most practical value you can imagine, is looking forward to heaven and then the new heavens and new earth after that, because of our reading material and our music material, training our imaginations for that. Preparing for death is like number one priority for Christianity, and the best fantastic stories can help us do that. So I'd like to terraform us to expect stories that are about the next world, not just this world.
I never really thought about that. Yeah. Have you read Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson?
Andrew Peterson. Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. He has very similar ideas about music.
And it's definitely, like, it's very applicable to also being an author and exploring all of that and just tying that into God's creation and as a creator, right? And that shared identity with God and anyway, all of that. Yeah.
All right. What is a rising trend that you are seeing, a positive trend that you are seeing that you are rather excited about in the fiction space?
That's a darn good one. And to make an observation about that, I have to risk a thing. And you'll find out in a moment what I mean. I believe that for Christian authors, what we would call the general market has shifted. Or is shifting right now. I think we still have in the backs of our imagination a type of secular culture that is antiquated. I don't think that's true anymore. I think the general market for many Christian authors, especially if we are labeling our stuff Christian fiction, but even if we just expect to be wholesome and generally accessible to readers of clean fiction, I think the general audience is cultural conservatives for us. By cultural conservatives, I mean people who, they vote certain ways. They may call themselves politically conservative. Irrespective of that, they believe in certain Judeo-Christian ideas. Maybe they're Catholic, maybe they're Mormon, maybe they're secular, maybe they're atheists, but they like what Christianity gave the world in terms of civilization and certain ideas and worldview pieces. So they kind of pick and choose the ones they like. And like I mentioned earlier about Musk, they leave out the Jesus parts. There's dangers there. There's dangers for cultural Christianity. And many of our listeners know those dangers. But I do think that increasingly is becoming the general audience for us. It's not a Christian audience necessarily. But if you're the type of writer who's going, I don't want to write. I'm not a Christian writer. I'm just a writer who happens to be Christian. I think this is your general audience. And I think more publishers are going to be responding to that vibe shift. A lot of people are calling it. And they're going, well, gee, it looks like this Christian made stuff, this wholesome stuff, this clean stuff, That's the next trend. So I think we're going to see some more publishers aiming for that kind of audience, the types of folks who maybe don't go to public schools. Maybe they go to a secular private school. Or maybe they listen to, the Joe Rogan podcast or something like that. There's a lot of people who are getting into that stuff, and I think their fiction preferences are going to follow that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with that. I think that's a great observation. Just the shift towards allowing things to be PG-13 as opposed to, well, we need more darkness. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't have to be YA to be PG-13. Indiana Jones is not YA.
Yeah.
And it's,
Well, exactly. And not only that, but just a lot of people are concerned about particular newfangled religious agendas in their books. And usually they'll dress that up as a code. We see parents, for example, they will say, does this book have agenda? And that's kind of the code, And I go, well, every book has an agenda, but I know what you mean. I feel you. They're looking for books that at absolute baseline don't have the agenda or the message, as one YouTuber calls it.
Yes.
And those are the types of books that I think are going to succeed more in this particular cultural shift.
I wonder if a lot of that comes from our side and our point of view, that we've been on the back foot of how do we write in a way that isn't agenda, Christian agenda or any other agenda.
Right.
How do you learn? It does take life experience to get older to do so sometimes, but how do you learn to steel man the enemy's argument in a book, antagonist's argument?
Oh, the steel man. I love that phrase. I was just thinking about that recently. In other words, the villain's perspective needs to make sense. The antagonist's perspective needs to make sense, but it still needs to go down, because I do believe, just like Christian heroes may believe, no, Jesus is better than the alternative worldview.
Exactly. Readers are not stupid. And when you start straw manning, they check out. You better have a really good Michael Bay explosion at that point, or that's it.
Exactly. Do y'all mind if I ask myself a very, very, very tough question? I'll pretend that someone out there in the live stream has asked this. Is your book preachy? Is it? You said it's about space missionaries and it's all about sharing the gospel. Like, that sounds really preachy. That sounds like you're going to try to club the reader over the head with, repent and believe the gospel. There's a key difference, I think, and readers can discern for themselves. And that's preachy. Maybe you may read C.S. Lewis and say, "Oh, that's too preachy." In this case, I think the difference could be summarized by this: in a preachy story, the sermon gives the character what he or she needs, if only he or she would follow it consistently. In a more human story, the sermon or the message is early in the story, the thing the character believes wholeheartedly. And yet that truth only provokes the inciting incident of the story. The truth provokes the inciting incident and is not the resolution necessarily. I mean, it will be eventually, but it needs to be the start of everything that goes wrong for our hero or heroine, rather than the easy solution by a pastor in the altar call scene at the end of the movie. And that more closely matches to real life, because we know the truth, we go to church, we get it from faithful ministers, but it certainly causes a lot of problems sometimes when we're looking around at other people and we see them pursuing other kinds of truth, and that really seems to be working out better. And that's what the psalmists lament, right? And when they says, hey, why do the wicked prosper? That's the problem with the villains in my story. They're prospering, they're doing awesome stuff, and our heroes are kind of locked up in their over-sheltered environments on earth.
I'm
just realizing you're saying that, and it's that the altar call in the middle is a far too early denouement, deus ex machina, versus what you're saying, where when you set up the inciting incident, it's literally you're a wizard, Harry, and now we get to see the wizarding world. Where in the case of your book, you're a missionary, Brock.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Now you get a plot because of that.
Okay, now that's got to be the quote for this live stream. Is have an impression you're a missionary.
I'll do it again better. You're a missionary, Brock.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
here's your cake.
Cut it, clip it, put it on the Instagram reel. Yeah, being called to be a missionary is just the beginning of the headaches for this poor family. and it's just going to lead to more difficulties. And that is the case with every real missionary I've ever talked to or read about. The call to missions, which to some extent every Christian shares because Jesus said so, that just gives us more headaches. Yeah, he gave us the assurance that he'd be with us, but it's not supposed to be easy. It is not the resolution to the story. It's the inciting incident.
Yeah.
I mean, like parenthood, you're never ready, but you got to go. You got to have that kid. You got to go be the missionary. Once
Congratulations.
You're going to figure it out.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's always it's not the happy ever after, right?
Right.
It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning.
Well, similarly,
becoming a Christian, right, is just the beginning. Yeah.
Well, that's where I break. Maybe that's why I could never be a romance writer, because I would love the story to start with the marriage.
Yes.
Or even have the marriage in an unseen prequel. And because I think what's more interesting after that is the struggles of the married couple as they grow in love for one another and in covenant to Christ and have kids if they're able to, and all the ups and downs of married life. You guys know, and my wife and I know, and that's a more interesting story to me, but that means I could never be a romance writer.
Yeah.
Or could you?
Or could I know? Sounds like
maybe that's the next trend afterwards.
You had said romance is in the book. And
absolutely.
It's about their relationship as well. So I'm excited for that.
Absolutely. It is. I mean, you saw on the cover there, that is the Rivers family right there on the cover. And God bless the designer for putting all 5 of them there. It was a pleasant shock to actually see them for the first time. But, they've gone off to Mars. They've had their kids. They have fought to raise them in the most hostile environment you could imagine. And now it's going to be a further struggle to protect them from the humanist regime, even while they're trying to engage in missions.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Okay, so you've been writing for 23 years on this book. I think if my math's correct.
Let's see. There's a terrible original story that will never see the light of day. We all have those.
This is the way.
This is the way. Yeah. But we won't talk about that. So, I mean, I'll round it off to maybe 20, I'd say 25 years off and on. So the people are not expecting some grand, sweeping space. It's a very deeply personal story, but the world building should reflect some maturity over 25 years, I hope.
That's wonderful.
What advice would you give to the writer who is just starting out? They've been maybe they're writing a year, maybe a little less. What's the first thing you would tell them? Yeah.
Don't be hasty. Now, writers, of course, can afford being hasty. They can write their first drafts, self-edit, and then hit publish on Amazon and send it out to the world. This is where I speak just as much as a Lorehaven publisher as now a science fiction author is. Take your time. Take your time. And probably the best thing you can do during that time is understand from a biblical perspective, what is the purpose of stories?
Yes.
What is the purpose of stories? How would you answer that? To entertain? Yes. To edify? Yes. To get back at my enemies? No. I've seen a few of those. And oddly enough, I have to be careful how I promote this story, because if I say too much about, well, Brock's going to have to fight his own people at home, that's technically true. There's some opposition, but this story loves the church. And I'd love to have Christian authors learn to love the church, flaws and all, heal from the damage that churches have given people, real damage that they have. But then learn to love Christian readers. And I think by that, you'll also be able to learn to love other kinds of readers at the same time. So 1, don't be hasty. 2, answer the question, what is the purpose of stories? Answer, to help us glorify God and enjoy him forever, which just generates more questions, of course. It's the beginning of the answers. And then 3, learn to love your readers. And if you're a Christian, I think that starts with the family that God has given you, the spiritual family, and maybe your in-person family also.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So, yes.
No, don't name him Tommy Robinson. Name them Robbie Tomlinson, and then you're good.
From Pleasant Valley Middle School. Please explain this reference to me. I was homeschooled. It's over my head.
I'm guessing he's talking about eviscerating your enemies in fiction.
Right.
Like from Knight's Tale to eviscerate you with which
no.
I've done. Always change your name.
I get the Oh, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm a little legalistic against the t-shirt that says, be nice to me or I'll put you in my book. Like,
Yes.
okay, that's kind of funny, but I've seen enough in the
Yes.
Lorehaven library, which now has like 1,426 titles listed from Christian made authors. And there's some stories that people submit. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a vengeance quest. They're very rare.
Yes,
but I'll
but they do
occasionally see those. But I think the don't be hasty part is much more about learning the craft, learning what readers want. And then, and don't write a Nephilim story. We've got plenty. It's okay. We've got plenty. You're good. Branch out, explore, try some other mythologies, and make sure that the story is about the person, not the moral virtue you're trying to teach.
Yes.
Exactly. That's it. And same with the villain, right? That it's not the moral. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't nerf the villain so that the moral virtue gets easier. That was a problem with some of the Star Trek episodes, right? All the other admirals looked stupid in Starfleet so that Kirk could look awesome, but they didn't need to do that. Kirk was already awesome,
right?
And so the better episodes had Kirk surrounded by really great people who would match him in skill or confront him with their villainy.
Yeah,
but along with that too, like the hero is not perfect. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, especially biblically, right? All of our heroes. That's what's so great about the Bible heroes is how broken they are.
Yeah.
So they give us hope.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about
the kids right now, and it's so funny.
Yes.
The little flaws that are dropped in just for fun.
About Saul.
That it's like Saul hid in the baggage train. You're like, okay, he's hiding because he's a coward. He's a real person. Weird. And it's like, no, because this is just a history. And it's like, on the money.
Awesome.
Well, a quick thought about that. We were talking about Superman earlier. The best portrayals of Superman I like are the ones that aren't trying to say he's some Jesus character.
Right.
He's just a guy trying to do the right thing. And that puts Superman more on the footing of a Christ figure or a Christian figure, rather than a direct Christ figure. I think maybe readers, we get wrapped up with Aslan and we love Aslan, and maybe we try to think, okay, well, is my book really Christian because it doesn't have a Christ figure? Like, I think a Christian made book can be just as Christian by having a Christ figure or a Christian figure. And the best characters are going to remind us not directly of Jesus, but like ourselves. That's why The Chosen works so well, by the way. It literally has a Christ figure in there. Jesus is a character, their illustration of him, but it's as much about the disciples and his followers. And they remind us of us.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's like that's why I love Don Treader, is because you get to see Edmund post all he's gone through be an understanding individual towards Eustace as much as he doesn't want to be. And then again in Silver Chair, Eustace has gone through it, and now he's trying to be the understanding character.
So again, that there's not the happy ending. It keeps going, right? What's the next step is discipleship and leading the next, which is what our pastor keeps talking about. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds like y'all have a good pastor.
Yes. He's on fire right now.
All right. Oh, that's terrible.
It's a good fire. Good fire.
He's on fire. Okay.
The holy fire.
Okay, there we go. Holy fire is bad. Well, that's okay. Yeah.
Yes. That is a good comment. So Dan here was saying, I'd be a little nervous about writing dialogue for Jesus, right? So how does your dialogue reflect Christian morality and Christian issues?
Oh, this is a fun one. Jesus is not a character in this story. It is,
right.
He is, but he is living and active. He is the Word. He is the providence. He is the divine mover of our characters' motivations, our Christian characters for sure. So he is active in this world, but he's not going to cut in with a miracle all the time. For one thing, that's kind of against the genre of science fiction. Human problems call for human solutions. That's kind of a staple of this kind of science fiction, which I would describe, by the way, as hard science fiction with rounded corners. It's right in between. It's not about the technology. It's about the people, but hopefully the technology is well thought out and it runs well in the background. I would say that the theological truths behind the story are running in the background right alongside the technology. I mean, there's just enough, there's just as much work hopefully put into the Christian worldview as there is for the Martian calendars. But you don't have to have the Martian calendars right in front of your face to understand that, hey, time passes on Mars like this. The seconds are a little longer. The days are reckoned, years are approximately 2 Earth years. There's all kinds of fun trivia there, but that's technobabble. If you get distracted, some readers like it. If we have like 2 pages talking about Martian calendars, well, Star Trek has technobabble. Above the Circle of Earth has occasional, in service of the story, theobabble. But it is about the story, because what people believe is going to affect what they do and whether or not our heroes get their dreams fulfilled.
Yeah.
For example, there's a scene where we're talking about, hey, how do we pay for a space mission? Should we work with other people who are not Christians who also have it in for the space technocracy and just all go up in a ship together? Well, that's a real challenge, and it's kind of parallel with some other challenges Christians have when we engage with the world. Hey, what do our partnerships with non-Christians look like?
Right.
And so that's a challenge to the story. Little theobabble, but it's in service of the goal, and it's a actual conundrum for people.
Right.
What do we decide about this?
Yeah.
You've done your research. I take it you do have a Mars calendar chart though for yourself.
There are 2 of them.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you get 2 Martian calendars for the price of 1. And yeah, I mean, it's just a real Earth year coming up. You can predict things using the planetarium software and everything. So all that stuff should be accurate. If it's not, my bad. But 2 Martian calendars, y'all. 2.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's awesome. So Dan's on fire here. He's got another question here.
Thanks, Dan.
Different sci-fi question. How much vocabulary can you make up before you lose the reader?
Oh, that's a good one.
Very good question.
Yeah. Very writerly questions here, which I kind of expected. Yeah, Dan, I don't like opening a book and finding an instant glossary. Like, here, dictionary for you, some homework. I don't put it in the back, maybe. But I would rather not feel like the author is lecturing me about a periodic table that he made up for his world, which applies to fantasy as much as science fiction. A slow introduction, I think, of sci-fi concepts or terms, I think, is better, and always in the context of an action moment, like something deeply human, and I'm motivated to find out what's happened. So I'll do my little homework along the way, but only in bits and pieces. That's at least how I approached it. Similar to things like backstory and things like that. Like, you got to keep that momentum going, especially in space. So once you shove it, it kind of tends to keep going. That's an actual Newtonian law there. And that's hopefully what this story does.
Yeah.
Right. So do you have beta readers? Does your wife pre-read your books or anything to help you like cut all of that? Or
earlier in the process, absolutely. Like before acquisitions, you bet. I had lots of folks reading through it, and blessed, by the way, to have folks with different genre preferences go through there. Some sci-fi fans, some fantasy fans, at least one romance writer. Like, everybody brings something different to a project like this, especially because science fiction is still, people aren't sure what to make of it necessarily from a Christian worldview. We're good with fantasy because C.S. Lewis wrote it. And I guess he also wrote science fiction. Yeah. So there's kind of the in there, but his science fiction is very fantasy heavy. Like, Paralandra is just straight up fantasy. There's barely a spaceship in there. Angels carry Dr. Ransom to Venus, Paralandra, instead of a spaceship.
Right.
So Lewis switches genres on you. So I think people understand the theory of it, but the problem, I think, with science fiction is a lot of it, especially the thicker stuff like Arthur C. Clarke, it is deeply humanistic. As Asimov deeply, that's the roots of it. Even H.G. Wells is very, very humanistic. And so there's still that stigma attached, whereas the fantasy stigma is about gone, I think, for Christians.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming.
Hopefully for good reasons, good biblical reasons.
Yes, exactly. Well, it helps with podcasts like yours, right?
That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just because I think a lot of Christians were thinking, a lot of our friends were saying the same things that we hear on Lorehaven, but it was so nice to hear it from an outsider, right? To go, oh, we're not alone. We're not the only people who are going, where's the Christian authors writing science fiction and fantasy and seeking that speculative faith.
And the algorithm likes to hide us from each other as well.
Yeah.
It's very good about that.
There's isolated circles, right? Like, one thing that Lorehaven aims to do is connect those circles. And now our friends at Realm Makers are also connecting the circles. We got this big expo coming up in Grand Rapids in July. I'll be there. Lorehaven will be there. And we'll get to see some of those groups come together that have been, in our little preserves, kind of sheltered. And now we're finally finding each other, and we realize, back to the Ent example, we're waking up and finding, we're a little stronger than we thought.
That's
Right.
There's more of us than we thought.
Right.
Speaking of which, would you like to tell us about Realm Makers a little bit?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I'm not like, I didn't found Realm Makers, but I was there at the first one. So, I mean, I feel very invested. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Realm Makers started in 2013 as a Christian run conference for fantastical creators. Specifically, it's the kind of writers conference where if you're a Christian who writes about prairie romances, Lord bless you, but you're probably going to feel a little left out at Realm Makers, just like some of the fantasy authors felt left out at the Christian Prairie Romance Convention.
Right.
So if you go to Realm Makers, you will learn not only Christian influenced rules about creativity, worldview, basics of craft, how to self-edit, how to find an agent. You'll have agents and editors to pitch to. But now that's been Realm Makers, the writers conference, for 10, 12 years or so. But now they've upgraded at last, and it's going to be an expo, a fan-centered convention, as well as a writers conference. There's going to be a couple of other groups there, Christians who make board games or video games, for example. They're going to be there. We're going to have a booth. It's going to be very cool. Just booked my hotel room right before coming on here, actually. So my wife and I go every year. The Lorehaven booth will have like quests for people to do. But this time, Lord willing, we'll have like the fantasy side of the booth and the sci-fi side of the booth. So we're going to celebrate both.
Nice.
And if you ask me, I'll celebrate good Christ exalting, redemptive horror with you as well. Jesus in every genre is our theme this year.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So any mystery authors?
Not that I know of. But I'm sure you could come. Please do. Absolutely. Well, if you like fantastical fiction, even as a reader, then I love that it's going to be more of a reader fan focused event as well as the writers event. Like I'm not even, unless something changes, I'm not even going to the writers convention. I'm too busy just reaching out to readers right now. And I love to see it go more in that direction. It's not just readers or writers talking with each other. Lamenting the state of affairs. We're going out, we're talking to the readers, and we're getting to know them, and we're humbling ourselves and listening to what they want.
Which is this.
That's our favorite part about a convention, is being able to, someone walks up to the booth and we can just sell off of each other and work with each other to reach the person for what they're looking for.
Right. Because then they've met us.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So I'll be at Realm Makers, the expo, but also Realm Makers bookstore is going to at least 2 homeschool conventions in May. I'll have more information on my website about that as I'm joining them, but it'll be there's a Pigeon Forge Teach Them Diligently conference, and then the Florida Parent Educators Association conference in Orlando. And it's been fun, even just there as Lorehaven publisher, before I have my own book, just talking to a lot of cool homeschool families. They tend to be a little large, so they have lots of ages and lots of preferences. And Realm Makers Bookstore has books for all of them, including the grown-ups. And that's where I think we'll finally break out, is when the grown-ups realize, I don't have to just get books for my kids. Like I can get books for me. I can read the YA books, but I can also read like books that are not YA, like Above the Circle of Earth, but it's YA friendly. But once the adults are really, I can get some grown-up books. You can't say adult fiction. That's been stolen.
Right.
It's not adult.
Books, books for, a little bit more complex themes and things like that. I think, but that'll be the next trend too, hopefully, is grown-ups realizing we get books for us too, that exalt Christ and explore fantastical worlds.
Exactly. Yeah. So would you say, your book is for older,
all ages, but can be read down to a particular age?
Yeah.
I'd say the youngest age would be a 15 or 16-year-old student who likes science fiction and is open to reading about this kind of missionary adventure. I was 16 when I first read Frank Peretti's novel The Visitation. Which is the first Christian-made novel I read that really helped me think more about the difficulties of ministry and some of the types of wild and obnoxious personalities you'll encounter in local churches. And it really helped me.
You were too young to have experienced it yet.
Yes, but I got to train thanks to Frank Peretti. There's no angels in sight necessarily, but it's a very human story. And I think it's Frank Peretti's best novel, and it may be a comp for Above the Circle of Earth. I just got more spaceships.
Okay. Awesome. I haven't read that one actually.
That is a really good one. We had a book quest for it last summer because it was a 25-year anniversary. We had a book quest for it in the guild. I highly recommend it.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, that's about our time.
Yes, we hit our
hour.
So
where can we find you? Where can we get your books?
All right.
All the links below.
Gotcha. Go to lorehaven.com. That's the top one. That's the top one there. That is to explore fantastical stories for God's glory. And I'll tell you, we are upgrading the front page of the site so that everything's going to be easier to find. And the one thing we're going to emphasize this spring is the library book search. You'll be able to put in a keyword, filter by ages and genres and some other things, and find exactly the best kind of Christian-made published fantastical book that you would want to read or that a family member or friend would want to read.
Wonderful.
We got over 1,400 titles listed in there and over 330 reviews in order to help people find the best books. That's at lorehaven.com. I'm at estephenburnett.com. You're not supposed to give more than one link, but estephenburnett.com for information specifically about what I'm up to, including Lorehaven, but a whole lot of Above the Circle of Earth stuff there too.
Awesome. Well, 1 month and 5 days until your book comes out. Please go out and pre-order it right now, because the more you pre-order, the faster they'll sign them up for another book.
Yes.
Who knows? Who knows? Let's see how this one flies. Let's see how she flies.
Right. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It was a pleasure. Really appreciate it. Great sharing faith and fantastical fandom with you both.
Likewise.
Absolutely,
thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody who was in the live chat, and those of you who are watching later. Thank you so much for joining us again. And be sure to go pick up his book and
we'll see you soon.
Learn more. Yeah. And we'll see you soon. Bye.